In moments like these, my mind often drifts back to my time in the desert. Here I am, staring through a scope at my target. But this time, my target isn't a terrorist or a criminal. It's a balding, sweaty, slightly overweight banker, currently engaged in an affair with one of his subordinates from the bank. Why am I watching him? Because I have a contract to end his life. Someone, whom I'll never meet, arranged the hit through the dark web, paid in cryptocurrency. By the time any law enforcement is alerted, I'll be long gone, leaving behind no traces. I observe through my scope, waiting for the right moment to shoot. I'm not a voyeur, but I need to wait for the opportune moment. I can't shoot while they're in the act, but once he finishes, that's my cue. After ensuring my surroundings are secure, I focus on the target. As he reaches climax and heads for the bathroom, I pull the trigger and swiftly depart before the inevitable chaos ensues. I stash my gear in a secure location, part of my meticulous preparation, before heading home. During the journey, I reflect on how I ended up as a hitman, specializing in taking out cheating spouses. The shooting part comes naturally to me. I've always been skilled with a rifle, honed from hunting on the farm since I was young. It's almost instinctive for me. When I enlisted in the Marines and went through sniper school, they taught us all about trajectories, wind resistance, ballistics, and other scientific principles. I absorbed the knowledge, but truth be told, I didn't really need it. Making a shot was more about instinct for me than calculations and technology. It just came naturally. I had a promising career ahead of me in the Marines until something happened that changed everything. It all started with a cheating spouse. Gabrielle, a French-descended woman with a petite frame and dark hair, entered our lives one evening at a bar during some well-deserved R&R. She was charming, lively, and had a physique that stirred all sorts of thoughts. Throughout the evening, she danced with me and my best friend Bobby. As the night wore on, it became clear that there was a connection between Gabrielle and Bobby. With a rueful smile, I wished Bobby luck and headed back to base alone. From then on, whenever we went out, Bobby and Gabrielle were inseparable. I found myself either playing the third wheel or entertaining myself while they enjoyed each other's company. I was surprised when, after only 3 months, Bobby showed me the ring he bought for Gabrielle. "Impressive rock," I remarked, voicing my concern. But Bobby was convinced he was making the right move. During the bachelor party I organized, which was a wild success, I made sure Bobby's virtue was protected, despite the mandatory presence of strippers. I had previously discussed boundaries with Gabrielle to ensure Bobby's happiness. The wedding was a modest affair, attended by our parents, friends, and some of our platoon members. As Bobby's best man, I stood by his side. 2 months later, we were back in the desert on a 3-month tour, tasked with searching a village for insurgents. I had already scouted a vantage point to provide overwatch for the team, although it wasn't perfect. Bobby had been acting strangely all day, unusually eager to head out and brusque with everyone, including me. When I asked him what was wrong, he just grinned and brushed it off, saying he was anxious to get going. But Bobby never returned from that patrol. His team later told me what happened. When they engaged the enemy, Bobby charged forward, shouting and firing his weapon like a movie gangster. He didn't make it far before he was cut down. As his best friend, I was tasked with packing up his belongings to send back home, and that's when I found the letter. It was a breakup letter from Gabrielle, confessing that she had found someone else and was leaving Bobby for him. She expressed regret but believed it was best for both of them. I was enraged, realizing why Bobby had been acting so off. Accompanying Bobby's body back to the U.S., I confronted Gabrielle at the funeral, furious at her betrayal. When I saw her with Colonel John Edwards, the officer who had been involved with her, my anger boiled over. I attacked Colonel Edwards, unable to contain my rage at both of them. We were both court-martialed, with me spending a year in military prison for assaulting a superior officer, while he lost his pension and was discharged from the service. It took me a year to track down Gabrielle, who had moved to Canada with a new partner. As for Colonel Edwards, I had no idea what became of him, but he was no longer my concern. I contemplated taking her out from a distance, a simple sniper shot, but that felt too impersonal. I wanted her to know who was ending her life and why. Her affair made it easy for me. I spotted her dancing with some friends, clearly still cheating as the guy she was with wasn't her French-Canadian partner. When they left for the SUV, I followed, knowing what was about to unfold. As they got intimate in the back seat, I intervened, rendering the man unconscious. Gabrielle turned to face me, shock in her eyes as she recognized me. Before she could speak, I delivered Bobby's message with 2 bullets to her chest. I vanished before anyone could react, crossing back into the U.S. within hours. Avenging Bobby gave me an idea. There must be countless people being cheated on right now, some seeking reconciliation, others divorce. But there are those who seek a more permanent solution, and I had the skills to provide it. Thus, I became a hitman, targeting those who stray from their marriages. It was straightforward work, with most targets unsuspecting and unprotected. After 4 years in this line of work, I met Juliana. She was a finance manager at a car dealership, stunningly beautiful and captivating. We quickly clicked, and within months, we were married in a grand ceremony. To the world, I was a successful money manager, often traveling for business. It was the perfect cover for my real occupation. Life with Juliana was fulfilling. She supported my work in money management, even during my business trips. Our intimate life was passionate and frequent, a bond that strengthened our relationship. Juliana valued our commitment, always accompanying me when we went out, ensuring our interactions with others met our mutual standards. Contracts came through the dark web, requiring caution in their execution. I maintained anonymity, strictly conducting business online, with payments secured in virtual accounts. My clientele sought retribution for infidelity, and I delivered, regardless of gender. It was a job, and I executed it efficiently. As our family grew with the arrival of our children, Juliana returned to work while I continued from home, contemplating retirement. One last contract would secure our future, and I aimed to wrap up my career. Reviewing available contracts, I settled on one nearby, targeting Peter Miller, an insurance salesman with a history of infidelity. Miller's itinerary brought him close to our location, staying in a hotel for the week. The contract tasked me with monitoring his activities, ready to act if he engaged in extramarital affairs. Included with the contract were photos of the man, his wife, and their 3 children. It puzzled me why they always included the kids' pictures, but it seemed to be standard practice. The dossier was meticulously prepared, providing not only the man's hotel details, but also his room number. A quick online search confirmed he had booked a room on the 5th floor, east side. Consulting Google Earth, I spotted a nearby construction site that could offer a strategic vantage point. Positioned on a high floor of the unfinished building, I would have a clear view of the hotel's east side, unobstructed by the shorter buildings across the street. I have to travel next week, I informed Juliana on Friday evening. I'll be leaving Monday morning and returning Thursday, possibly Friday. She glanced up from her book. Thought you were done with those trips, she remarked, more inquisitive than complaining. This might be the last one, depending on how things go, I replied. There could be another if this one falls short. Nodding, she grinned. Then we have the whole weekend together, she said. We didn't spend the entire weekend in bed. After a delightful Friday night, we ventured out on Saturday, attending to errands before dining at our favorite restaurant. Saturday night and most of Sunday were spent indulging in each other's company. Monday morning, I left for the airport, parking my car and retrieving a nondescript vehicle from a nearby storage unit. A gray Toyota sedan, inconspicuous and registered under a fake ID, awaited my use. Positioned on the 7th floor of the construction site, I aimed my spotting scope at the man's window, awaiting his return. He re-entered his room just after noon, and I settled in to observe. It wasn't until after 6 p.m. that he returned, appearing rushed as he headed for a shower. Observing him, I noted his unremarkable physique, pondering what charm he possessed to attract others, as it certainly wasn't his appearance. After another 30 minutes, he emerged dressed and left. I grabbed a bite to eat and settled in, anticipating his return, likely with a woman in tow. My plan was simple: capture evidence of his infidelity, then end his life with a bullet to the skull. The contract didn't specify anything about sparing or killing the woman, so she would be spared. While I had no qualms about eliminating cheating individuals, I lacked information about her. She might simply be a naive woman falling for his deceitful charm, and so she would live. After midnight, the room's light flickered to life, and I peered through my scope. My target entered with a tall, dark-haired woman. She wasted no time, pressing him against the door and dropping to her knees. My vantage point limited my view to their torsos, but I remained patient, confident they would move into clearer sight soon. As they moved towards the bed, she was left in her underwear, and he stripped naked. Pushing her onto the bed, he began pleasuring her orally. Despite my urge to act, I resisted, opting to snap a photo with the camera attached to my scope instead. Over the next few hours, I documented their intimate acts with photos and videos. Their disregard for privacy was astonishing, engaging in various positions throughout the room, even near the window where they could easily be seen from the street. As they finally settled into bed for the night, I sat back, my mind reeling. I reviewed the initial photo on my phone, focusing on the woman's face as she reached climax, a face I knew all too well. It was my wife, Juliana, her eyes wide with ecstasy, a realization that shattered my heart and left me grappling with disbelief. My mind raced with conflicting thoughts. Completing the hit now was out of the question. My safety relied on having no connection to the victims or their partners. If I acted impulsively, the police would undoubtedly trace it back to me. Plus, I couldn't make a rational decision about Juliana in my current state of anger. I had to consider my children's well-being and the long-term consequences of my actions. This was a decision I couldn't rush. There was another concern. Returning the contract might lead someone else to take it up, someone less discerning about collateral damage. And what if this was a setup? Had someone orchestrated this encounter to expose me? Though I wasn't worried about law enforcement, there could be other parties involved seeking revenge, possibly connected to my past contracts. No, I had to fulfill the contract discreetly, making it appear accidental or natural to avoid any scrutiny from law enforcement. Juliana would have to wait. I needed more time to strategize. I packed away my equipment and returned to the lockup, opting not to use it for this job. Instead, I retrieved additional electronic gear, then placed GPS trackers on both their cars. The next morning, after they had left, I broke into the hotel room using a spoofed electronic key card. I found nothing remarkable in his belongings except for some medications and Viagra. Installing hidden cameras, I ensured I had 4 days to execute the contract. Booking a room at the hotel under my fake identity simplified matters. I observed their movements throughout the day while preparing for the task at hand. Juliana followed her routine, unaware of my plans, while he headed toward my house, a move that nearly triggered a violent response from me. Thankfully, he stayed clear. In the evening, Juliana called me. "Hey babe," she said. "Hi, honey, I missed you last night. I thought you were going to call." Juliana's voice sounded cheerful. "Sorry, I fell asleep in front of the TV, and by the time I woke up, it was too late," she replied swiftly. "I figured as much. That's why I didn't disturb you," I said, my fist tightening. It was the first time I caught Juliana lying to me. Perhaps there were others I hadn't known about. "How are things going with your meeting?" she inquired. There was an unexpected complication. Someone unexpected turned up in the meeting, and it has raised some issues. I'm certain I'll be able to close the deal, but it may take a little longer and be a bit messy. Having said that though, once this is done, I won't be traveling anymore, I explained. "So you'll be coming back Friday then rather than Thursday?" Her tone seemed playful. "You don't sound too disappointed," I retorted a bit acidly. "Oh no, not at all. I was just happy that you said this is the last time you'll be traveling. If an extra day on this trip means it's the last, then it's worth it," she reassured. "Good recovery, bitch," I thought to myself, but instead asked, "So what are you up to tonight?" "I just got back from the gym, so I'm going to veg out in front of the TV and have an early night." "I have to work too, you know," she replied. "Well, remember what my mother always told me," I joked, "if you're not in bed by 11, you have to go home." She laughed. "I'll call you tomorrow evening. I miss you. Good night." I'm not sure if she noticed that I just hung up without saying anything further. My last call was to a friend of mine. He was a chemist and occasionally supplied me when my preferred method of killing was not appropriate. Sometimes people wanted things to look more natural. It normally put the price up, but in this instance, I would stand the loss. Asshole was back in his hotel by the time I returned, having seen my friend. When I logged into the camera, I could hear his phone ringing. "Hey, Jules," he answered. I winced. Juliana hated her name to be shortened. If this was her, and she was allowing him to call her Jules, it made things worse. Strange how little things like that matter. Their conversation continued. "No, I was laid back. Give me an hour to get ready, and I'll meet you downstairs. Shall we say 7:30? Yes, looking forward to it. I am so going to make you squeal tonight. I'll make you forget that lame-ass cuck you married," he said gleefully. No, Juliana," he said. "I didn't mean it. I know he isn't." "No, baby, please." "Julie." He looked at his phone. "Fuck," he said savagely. A grim smile crossed my lips. It seemed like he had talked his way out of a night of passion. My phone rang, and it was Juliana. "Hey babe, what's up?" I said, surprised by her call. "Nothing," she replied. "I just remembered I didn't say I love you when we spoke earlier. I just wanted to make sure you knew." She sounded a little upset. "Are you okay?" I asked, sensing something wasn't right. "I'm fine," she replied. "I just miss you is all." Her phone beeped to indicate another call was waiting. I glanced at my computer screen and saw that asshole was on the line. I guessed it was him calling her. "Why don't we chat for a while then?" I suggested. "It will be almost like I'm there." I waited to see her decision. Would she continue chatting with me or return to talking to asshole, allowing him to charm her into another night of intimacy? She chose wrong. "No, I'm just being silly. Listen, my mom is trying to ring me. I just wanted to tell you I love you. Good night." "Night, Jules," I muttered before hanging up. I wondered if she even noticed. Back in asshole's room, I heard his phone ring, and he smiled as he answered. "Hey babe." "Yes, I'm really sorry." "No, I won't." "Okay, tomorrow then? How about I take you to dinner at Archie's? I'll book a table for 7? "Yes, I know. I'm sorry about earlier." "Yes, I love you too, Juliana." Night. I love you too? I thought to myself, did she really love this asshole, or was it just a reflexive way to end a call? I would find out tomorrow. Shortly after, I heard him call down for room service and order a meal and a couple of beers. It was time to make my move. I waited for the room service to be delivered and for the hotel employee to leave. Just as asshole sat down to eat, I knocked on his door. I stood back so he couldn't see me through the spy hole, but I don't think he even bothered to look. He opened the door, and his surprise was evident as he stared down the barrel of my silenced Glock. "Evening, Peter," I greeted amiably. "May I come in?" His mouth moved, but no sound came out. I stepped forward, and he instinctively backed away. The door closed behind me. "What do you want?" he managed to utter. "I have about $500 in my wallet. You can have that and—" "Nothing so crass," I interrupted. "I just want to have a nice friendly chat. You see, my employer, whom I believe you are familiar with, your wife Janine, has asked me for some answers. And you, my fine fellow, are going to give me those answers. I have a lot of information already, but there are some blanks to be filled in. So if you lie to me, I will know, and I will not hesitate to shoot you." He visibly paled at my words. "I really don't want to shoot you," I continued, maintaining a calm tone. "It's so much like hard work, and your good wife would much rather just divorce and humiliate you. Financially, you are worth more to her alive than dead, and she does believe that your kids would miss you if you were gone. But she wants the full, unvarnished truth about your affairs. Make no mistake, she's going after each one of the women you've been cheating with and will inform their husbands. If you tell me everything right now, fully and completely, I'll leave this room without having to clean up your corpse. Does that sound reasonable?" I asked, extending a beer bottle to him. He looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. So, if I tell you everything, you won't shoot me? He asked. I won't. I'll take my leave, and you can continue with your life. Perhaps if you grovel enough, your wife might even take you back, if only for the sake of your kids, I replied, gesturing for him to sit. What do you want to know? He asked, settling into the chair. There are 4 women I know pretty much everything about, I said, listing their names and addresses. I also know there's a woman here in town named Juliana who works at a car dealership. He nodded. Your wife didn't know much about her, so let's start there. Tell me everything about Juliana, how you met, how long you've been seeing her, everything. He began slowly, recounting his story as he sipped the beer I had given him. He had met Juliana about 4 months ago while visiting the car dealership for work. She was beautiful, charming, with an absolutely stunning body, and he was immediately captivated. They had a long meeting that morning, followed by lunch. Surprised by her easy acceptance of his invitation to dinner that evening, especially since her husband was out of town, he found himself back at his hotel with her that night, experiencing a memorable encounter. I stopped him when he started to delve into explicit details. I didn't need those. So, how often did you see Juliana? I inquired. We met about 8 or 9 times. Whenever her husband was away, she'd call me up, and if I could rearrange my schedule, I'd come over. I even canceled plans with my other flings for her. She was a far better companion than any of them, he said with a grin, momentarily forgetting his predicament as he gulped down the rest of his beer. Can I get another? He asked, gesturing toward the minibar. Slowly, I cautioned. It would be unfortunate for me to have to resort to shooting you over a misunderstanding. It seems we're developing some rapport. He grinned and fetched himself another beer. Want one, he offered, but I declined. Returning to his seat, he settled in as I continued. So, you mentioned Juliana made all the moves. Do you think this is typical behavior for her? I doubt it, but I'm sure I wasn't her first, he admitted. She showed no signs of guilt. However, she wouldn't tolerate any insults toward her husband. I made a mistake tonight, called him a cuck, and she let me have it. Otherwise, she'd probably be here now. It's odd that such comments would upset her, considering her actions, I mused. She's good at compartmentalizing, he explained. In her mind, the loving wife and the woman who visits me are separate entities. There's no guilt because, to her, they're completely different people. Physically, though, they're the same person, I pointed out. The mouth he kisses is the same one you. I get it, he interrupted. We didn't use protection. She insisted she was on birth control. What about STDs? I pressed. Given your numerous partners, did she never consider the risk of bringing something home? I'm not sure it even crossed her mind, he admitted. But I get tested regularly, and I'm clean. Though small comfort, I made a mental note to get tested myself. Suddenly, Peter winced and clutched his chest. Something wrong? I asked. Indigestion, he gasped. Haven't eaten, and the beers. His hand moved to his left arm, and he winced again. Concerned, I approached him. Peter, look at me, I instructed. His eyes widened with fear as he struggled to breathe. Help me, he pleaded. You should have stayed away from Juliana, I declared. My wife. His eyes widened in realization before he lost consciousness. It would be another 10 or 15 minutes before he passed away. During that time, I ensured there was no evidence of anyone else's presence in the room. Turning on the television and placing the meal in front of him, I orchestrated the scene to suggest he'd had a fatal heart attack while dining and watching TV. With his existing heart condition and Viagra use, any autopsy would likely attribute his death to natural causes. I confirmed that he was indeed deceased, then ensuring the corridor was clear, I hung the Do Not Disturb sign on the door handle and returned to my room. The following day, around 5:30 p.m., Juliana called me. Hey babe, how was your day? She chirped. Surprisingly productive, I replied. I've resolved one of the outstanding matters, and I'm confident about the last one. Listen, I had an idea. Since this is my final trip, why don't we fly down to Mexico for the weekend? We can meet at the airport and celebrate, maybe even extend it into a longer vacation. You can check your vacation time with Barry tomorrow. It's not like you need the job, I chuckled. Juliana laughed. Sounds like a plan. I'll talk to Barry and let you know tomorrow. What are you up to tonight? Just the usual, I replied. I have some things to catch up on. Oh, and I'm binge watching Sex/Life. It's quite captivating. Isn't that about a woman having affairs? She teased. Don't worry, it's just getting me excited for when I can see you again, she added. I glanced at the time, knowing she thought she had a dinner reservation for 7 and it would take her at least 40 minutes to get there. Listen, babe, dinner's ready, she said. I'll talk to you tomorrow, okay? Sure thing. Enjoy your dinner and your show, I remarked dryly. Bye, babe. Love you, she said before hanging up. Around 8:30, I heard knocking on Peter's hotel room door. Since I had placed the Do Not Disturb sign, the maid hadn't entered to service the room. I assumed Juliana had gone to the restaurant, waited, and returned to see why he hadn't shown up. The knocking persisted. 20 minutes later, I heard the door unlock and open. A hotel staff member entered, followed by Juliana. When they found Peter slumped over, his face in the remnants of last night's meal, the employee rushed to him. Juliana stood in the doorway, observing the scene. Is he dead? She asked. The hotel employee checked for a pulse, but it was clear he had passed away. His body had stiffened. Yes, he's deceased, the employee confirmed. Without a word, Juliana turned and exited the room. By the time the employee realized she had left, she was already in the elevator, leaving the hotel behind. The police and EMTs arrived and, after examining the room, discovered his medication. The EMTs concluded that he had suffered a fatal heart attack given his medical history and the circumstances of his discovery. The police spoke to the hotel employee, who informed them that they had entered the room upon the request of a woman who had come to visit the man. He didn't recognize the woman but mentioned seeing her earlier in the week. She had visited before. Although the man had been to the hotel previously and had female visitors, the employee suspected they might be escorts but didn't inquire further as the man tipped well and they were discreet. After everyone had departed, I retrieved my surveillance equipment and packed up my gear. The next morning, I checked out of the hotel and removed the GPS from Peter's car, which was still parked there. On Saturday morning, I picked up Juliana from the airport and we drove to the villa I had rented. She exclaimed happily at the sight of the private pool with its loungers and announced her intention to change. Can we chat for a moment, Jules? I requested. She turned to me, her expression wary. You know I don't like that nickname. Why not? I challenged. You didn't seem to mind when Peter used it. Her face paled, but she attempted to remain composed. Who's Peter? She asked. You know, Peter. The insurance agent. The one you've been involved with for the past 4 months. The one you were with on Monday night when you claimed to be too tired to call me, I stated. I don't know who you've been talking to or what you've heard, but... She started. I placed an 8x10 picture on the table between us, the one I had captured through my scope showing her in the throes of passion. She sank into her chair. Oh, was all she managed. Oh? I repeated incredulously. Is that all you have to say? Oh? She shrugged. How long? I inquired. She met my gaze evenly. About 4 months. He wasn't the first, was he? I pressed. Do you really want to go down this path? She challenged. What path? I retorted. Discovering the truth about my unfaithful wife? Insults? Seriously? Are you that immature? She shot back. Fine, get it out of your system. Call me every name in the book. Maybe you'll impress me with some originality. But before you start, there's something I want you to know. And what's that? I asked. Why I did it, she replied. I paused, considering my initial impulse to label her actions, but then gestured for her to continue. "We've been married a long time, haven't we?" she asked, and I nodded. "Can you tell me, on average, how many times a week we have sex?" she inquired. I reflected on it. "Well, it's declined as we've gotten older," I began, but she cut in. "Has it, though?" she challenged. "Yes, initially, we were intimate every day, sometimes multiple times. But as time passed, we still maintained a frequency of at least every other day, sometimes more. The connection between us was and still is incredible, and you remain the best lover I've ever had. However, things changed when you started your business trips. Sometimes you'd be away for weeks at a time. I was accustomed to regular intimacy, and suddenly being without it for extended periods was challenging. I tried various things on my own, even resorted to toys, but it wasn't the same. It didn't fill the void. One night, feeling desperate, I decided to go to the gym to relieve some tension since you weren't around. I was so frustrated that I must have attracted attention, and I ended up going home with someone. It was a way to address the longing you'd left me with. The guilt consumed me the next day. I feared you discovering it and the potential for it to damage our marriage. When you returned, I made every effort to make up for it, engaging in intimacy daily for a week, trying to compensate for something you weren't even aware of. But deep down, I knew it would happen again the next time you were away. And it did. After some time, I decided to accept this new reality, but I established some rules. First, I vowed never to engage in such activities when you were home. Not because I feared being caught, but because you were always my primary and most cherished partner. I didn't need anyone else if you were here. Second, I made a firm rule never to bring anyone back to our home. I would never disrespect you by entertaining another man in our bed. Similarly, I wouldn't tolerate any disrespect toward you from my other partners. Some men find pleasure in demeaning the husbands of the women they're involved with. If any of them dared to speak ill of you, I put an end to it. I stopped seeing them and, in some cases, even ended things abruptly. Third, I committed to regular STD testing. I didn't want to risk passing anything on to you. And before you jump to conclusions, it wasn't solely to avoid getting caught. I genuinely wanted to protect you. Additionally, I took extra precautions to ensure I couldn't become pregnant. I used an IUD and had a contraceptive implant. When we decided to have children, I stopped those precautions. I have copies of the DNA tests for our children, in case you need proof. I knew there was a possibility you might discover the truth and question their parentage. And yes, this means I've been living with this for the entirety of our relationship. You had me so hooked that I just couldn't do without it. A day or two was manageable, but anything more than that, I needed some relief. That's all it was, scratching an itch. I never had any emotional attachment to any of them. They were just flesh, sex toys, as far as I was concerned. The only person I've ever truly loved and been in love with is you. When you told me this was going to be your last trip, I was overjoyed. Finally, I could have you at home, all to myself. I wouldn't need to settle for second-rate substitutes anymore because I'd have the best one with me all the time. My days of settling for less were over. It's ironic that what might have been my last encounter with another man would be the one where I got caught. Your last time? I queried. Those pictures were taken on Monday. You said you couldn't go more than 2 days without it. So, are you expecting me to believe you didn't go out the rest of the nights? What about Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday? She chuckled softly. On Tuesday, he called me to say he was back at his hotel, but then he started badmouthing you. I told him it was over and that I wouldn't see him again. He called back later to apologize, and I forgave him, but I made it clear we were done for that night. I said we could meet on Wednesday, and he offered to take me out to dinner as an apology. So, that call that came in when we were talking on Tuesday, that wasn't your mom? I probed. She looked guilty for the first time. No, it wasn't, she admitted quietly. I hated lying to you. Not enough to stop, I retorted. Her eyes widened. Wait, you called me Jules on that call. You knew then? She asked. I received the pictures on Tuesday morning. There were transcripts of previous calls included, I explained. she sighed. I'm sorry you had to find out like that. It must have been horrible. Let's stay focused. You didn't meet him on Tuesday. What about the rest of the week? I pressed, curious to gauge her reaction to his death. On Wednesday, we were supposed to meet for dinner, she began. You mean when you were supposedly binge-watching on TV? I interjected wryly. I actually have been watching it, and it is good. I just didn't watch it that night. And no, it never gave me any ideas. As strange as it sounds, and please don't get angry when I say this, in my mind, I wasn't cheating. I was just fulfilling a physical need. To me, it was like going to lunch with a friend. I needed to eat, you weren't there, so I went with a friend. I know this may be hard for you to accept, but that's exactly how I saw, and to some extent, still see, what I was doing when I was with other men. And you may notice, I never said I was making love. I never did that with anyone but you. You're stalling, I stated plainly. Are you trying to avoid telling me what happened on Wednesday? Not at all, she replied. As I said, we were supposed to meet for dinner, but he never showed. I waited in the restaurant for 45 minutes, and I have to say, I was furious. I've never been stood up before. So, I decided to go to his hotel. When I got there, he didn't answer the door, but I knew he was in the hotel because his car was in the parking lot. I got the floor manager to unlock the door, and we found him face down in a steak dinner, dead as can be. According to the EMTs, he was on blood pressure medication, but the idiot was also taking Viagra, which you should never do. He must have had a massive heart attack. At least he didn't pass away while being intimate with you, I remarked. That would have been much messier. Oh, damn, I never thought of that, she admitted. That would have caused quite a stir. His poor wife would have found out. I think she already knew, I said. I suspect she sent me the pictures. Juliana nodded. So, at least I don't need to ask if you're going to see him again, I commented, and she gave me a wry smile. I won't apologize for what I did, she stated firmly. It was something I felt I needed to do. I am truly sorry for hurting you, though, and for how you found out. I was counting down the days until you stopped going on trips so that I wouldn't have to do it anymore. But I knew that as long as you kept traveling, it would continue happening. All I could do was try to minimize any fallout and hope that if you ever found out, your love for me would be strong enough for you to understand. Why didn't you come and talk to me? I inquired. We could have worked something out. I could have made changes, even taking you with me on my trips. Deep down, I knew that was unrealistic. I could never have taken her with me, but I needed to understand. I didn't want to be that wife, she confessed. The one who nags and complains about the way you provide for us. You loved your job, and we had a great life together. I didn't plan for this to happen, it just sort of happened, and by the time I realized, it was too late to take it back. I gazed at her silently, contemplating. So, she broke the silence, what happens now? I stood up and went to the kitchen of the villa, opening a bottle of wine and pouring us each a glass. Returning to the table, I handed Juliana a glass and sank wearily into my chair, downing half of my wine in a single gulp. I don't know, I began, feeling overwhelmed. This is all so much to process. We've been together for so long, and I believed that you loved me as deeply as I loved you. Yes, we had an active sex life, and yes, there were times when I was away for weeks or even months without sex. Sure, there were opportunities, but I remained faithful to our vows. I never strayed, never even entertained the thought. I didn't resort to toys or other means. I stayed committed. I struggled to comprehend how you could betray everything we built together, our promises, our vows, all for what? Just for physical satisfaction. Are you going to claim sex addiction? Should we consider counseling? I paused, raising my hand as she started to speak. Please, I've given you the chance to speak, at least listen to me. I leaned forward, pouring more wine into her glass and mine. I have countless questions. How can you separate sex and love so easily? Everything I've read suggests it's typically men who do that, not women. Supposedly, women need an emotional connection for satisfying sex. If that's true and you're not lying about lacking love in these encounters, then you were risking everything for meaningless encounters. How do you think that makes me feel? You also mentioned you couldn't go without sex for more than a couple of days at a time. So, what happens as I age? It's common knowledge that men's libido declines with age while some women experience heightened desire. Am I to return home to find you with someone else because my performance isn't up to par? How do I face myself in the mirror each day with any semblance of self-respect, knowing you've been unfaithful throughout our marriage? Dozens, maybe hundreds of times. You claim regular testing, but what good is that? You could have contracted something and passed it to me before any test results came back. You could have endangered us both. What about our children? Her face twitched, and she absently rubbed her left arm. I softened my tone. Peter was despicable, but I suspect he was developing feelings for you. He admitted he'd cancel on other women if you were available. What? She exclaimed. When did you talk to Peter? We had a conversation the night he died, I admitted. I was upset seeing you with him, so I took matters into my own hands to ensure it wouldn't happen again. Her face flushed, pain evident in her expression. What did you do? She asked. The same thing I just did to you, I snarled. I ended the affair. Say hello to him for me when you see him in hell.